Okay, so we're starting the recording. Okay. So we're going to take a look at how do you manipulate blocks, how do you create them, how do you edit them. Okay. So basically, again, just think of a block as a symbol, And they can be complex, they can be three-dimensional, such as those chairs. They can be three-dimensional or they can be two-dimensional. Okay. So the block commands are primarily located right up at the Home tab. Okay, you go to the Home tab and you notice this area called blocks right there. There is the insert command. There is the create. So the create command is the block command. Okay. Insert is insert. They have a really cool editing tool, this block editor. We're not going to have time to get into that, but blocks can be really complex because you can create them so that they can align up on like lines. So if you're creating let's say a sofa block, and you want it to always line up with the back wall, all you got to do is when you insert it, just touch a wall and it'll automatically line itself up for you. You don't have to pick anything, it'll do it for you. Those are called dynamics blocks. And you would do that through that block editor command. Again, we don't have time to do that, but those are some pretty complex things you can do. You can add parameters called distance and angle and alignments and all that good stuff. Okay. So then the other commands that you see there, these are attribute commands. So there's your attribute command, and then this is how you create attributes. So most of these commands right down here deal with attributes, so we're not going to be dealing with those. So interestingly, the one I talked about called the W block command initially, that's not on there, and that's a really important command. So we'll take a look at it. So does everybody have their model drawn up? So we've got, notice if I go through and freeze my layers, if I freeze that, that disappears, that disappears, that disappears, and that disappears. Okay. In the zero layer, of course, I'm using that because with blocks, there's something about blocks that is really unique, and that has to do, okay, where's my circle go? That got changed. How'd that get changed? Okay. There's something really unique about the zero layer with blocks. And we're going to see how that works in a minute. So the first thing we're going to do is create this into a block, and then we're going to utilize it. Okay? So to create a block, just go to this command called create, which is, again, you can just type in the word block. It should open up this dialog box for you, which is called the block definition dialog box. So you have three primary areas there that we are needing to look at. The one is this thing that's called the name. So you have to provide a name for it. If you have any blocks in your drawing right now, they would show up in this list. If you drop that drop arrow down, does anybody have any blocks showing up in their drawing? Should be blank. So once you create blocks, they exist in that drawing. Okay, so they would show up in that list. Right now we don't have any. So the naming convention is just like any other naming convention in AutoCAD. You can use 256 characters. Yeah, kind of crazy. I will tell you this, back in the original days of AutoCAD, blocks were limited to 8 characters. And the reason is because it was a DOS-based system. If any of you guys know anything about DOS, file names were limited to 8 characters at that time frame. So if you created a block that had more than that, or if you had a drawing file that had more than 8 characters, it wouldn't work as a block. Okay. Now you don't have that problem, but I still get occasionally, even in this newer version of AutoCAD, if I try to insert a block with a weird name, it doesn't like it. So I have to go out and rename it. I usually still keep my characters to about 8, just to be on the safe side. So we're going to go out here and create a block name. We're just going to call this block logo. And it's not case sensitive, so you can use uppercase, lowercase, or mix it, because it's going to recognize it either way. You can have spaces, underscore, $, hyphens, alphanumeric characters. You can't have slashes, a backslash, or forward slash, though. Those are illegal. Okay, so we give it a name. Then we come down and give it what's called a base point. So if I click a base point, I just hit this pick point. What this is going to be a handle that you're picking this block up with and inserting it with. So if you don't do anything, you might have noticed that that was set to 0, 0, 0. So what that means, if my block's sitting over here and 0, 0's over here, that's how it's inserting, okay? And that's not good. So normally we would want the insertion point that has something referenced on the block itself that makes sense. So like if I was drawing a door, it might be the hinge of the door. For this part, since it's a logo, I might use one of the 4 corners or the center of the block, okay? So I mean, it technically doesn't matter, but it does when you come to the insertion aspects, okay? So I'm going to use a shift right click, grab center, snap to the center, and what it did is it found the center point, and you'll notice when it comes back, it has some pretty outrageous coordinates there in X, Y, and Z, and those don't mean anything. Those are just telling me where it is with respect to the origin. But when it makes the block, it knows what it's picking it up with, okay? Everybody see that? Everybody good? If you don't do anything there, you're going to get an insertion point, but it's going to be 0, 0, 0. Okay? So the next thing that's very important is to select the objects that you want to make the block out of. Now, if you're going to have attributes on this block, if you guys ever want to experiment with that, you have to create the attribute definitions before you create the block. You can, I think, add them now, but it used to be pretty difficult. Okay? You cannot, it's really hard to add things sometimes, okay? So you kind of want to get it right the first time. If I do nothing right now, and hit OK, I will actually create a block that has nothing in it. And that can happen too. All you need is a name, and then it'll have an insertion point and it'll have no objects, okay? But we're going to go to select objects here. Select your objects with a window, and then hit enter. It will take a snapshot of that block, and you notice the little picture? That's a thumbnail. It shows you what it created the block out of. It also tells you how many objects it selected. Mine says it had 8. Okay? So pay attention to that. So after you selected objects, it has 3 radio buttons there: retain, convert to block, or delete. So they do different things. So if you retain, what it means is it leaves the original objects behind and creates the block out of them. So you still have a line and a circle and a rectangle and a piece of text. Okay. If you tell it to convert, so retain, leaves the original objects behind. If you convert to block, it'll create a block in your drawing, but it also makes the guy that's highlighted a block too. So this will become a block as well. So that becomes an inserted block in your drawing. Okay? The third option is the one I like, called delete. Because very often, when I'm creating blocks, I'm just doing it off to the side somewhere, and I don't really want it sitting there. Okay? So I'm going to delete it. And I also like to delete it because of this. If everything doesn't disappear when I hit OK, or some pieces disappear and some don't when I hit OK, I know I didn't create my block correctly. Okay? So when I do a delete, it's going to delete everything I selected, which tells me 2 things. One, it's correct, and the other one, I don't have it hanging out there anymore. Okay? So I like to use delete. If you want to make a block annotative over here in behavior, you would toggle that on so it would represent or allow you to deal with scale factors. Okay? This one's important, scale uniformly. If you toggle that on, the scale in X and Y can only be 1 to 1. Okay? So you can't multiply it 2 in the X and 1.5 in the Y. In other words, you can't squash this block. If you lock that down to a 1 to 1 scale factor, it's never going to be able to be changed. Okay? So if you want more flexibility, toggle this off. because you can't edit that after the fact on a block. Okay? If you want to allow exploding on this block, which means once you put it in, you can break it apart, then you want to make sure that's toggled on. That also gives you more flexibility. If you create blocks and you never want other users to explode them, then I would toggle that off. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and allow exploding, but we're not going to toggle on annotated, and we're not going to toggle on scale uniformly. Okay. So the other thing over here in settings, we can tell the block to represent inches, or you can have it unitless, or you can have it all different settings. Okay, that has to do with how it inserts. So that's kind of an important thing, depending on what you're using. So we can leave it alone. The other one that's kind of cool here is this hyperlink. Anybody know what a hyperlink is? Can you tell me a hyperlink? What is it? Nobody knows what a hyperlink is? Yeah, Kelly? Yeah, so it's a link to a web address, so it'll have a URL associated with it. So for instance, if we were drawing the doors symbols and we were using Pella doors, I think they were doors and windows. So you could target it right to the manufacturer with all that information, so that when somebody clicks on that hyperlink, it takes them to that. Okay, so that might be important for a designer. So you can add hyperlinks. You can also do what's called open this in the block editor, so that'll give you further editing tools. Okay, so we're not going to do that. All right, so we created a block name, we gave it a base point, we selected objects, we made it explodable, so we're now going to hit OK, and you should see your block nicely disappears. So that tells me that I created it correctly. If your block didn't disappear, well, you may have not set it to delete. But it also may mean that you didn't select it properly. Okay? Does everybody get that to work? All right, so now then, if we go back into the block command, but notice now when you open this up, you will see there is a block in there called logo. See that? Logo. So that now exists. Okay? Once you create a block, it's like a layer. It only exists in that drawing. Okay, it only exists in that drawing. All right, so now we're going to insert. So let's do this. Everybody, make sure that your zero layer is current. Okay, make sure your zero layer is current. And we're going to go to insert, which is right there. Now you can do what's called recent blocks, or you can do it from other drawings. I'm just going to, well, there's two ways to insert. If I do that, that's a nice, easy way to do it. You just click on that. It'll bring this in. Notice it's using the base point. And down below, it also allows me to do other things, like change the base point, or enter an X, Y, Z scale factor, or rotate it. But we're going to just go ahead and click it, bring it over here, and we brought a block in. Doesn't look any different, does it? Click on it, and you should notice that it's all one object. It's all one object. Okay? So it's no longer just one object. It's a bunch of objects. It's all one object. How about your grips? You got a bunch of grips, or do you just have one grip? Kevin?
Mine's not inserted back in.
Okay. Take a look. Yeah, you're not on the zero layer. That doesn't matter. Let's do it. Try something. Do a zooming sense. So what do you have? What did you do wrong? Your base point was way over here. Oh, you never set your base point right. Okay, so there's an issue. We can fix that. I'll tell you what we're gonna fix it real quick. So I want you to just delete all of except one of those blocks. Keep one block in there, and I'll explode that. Just click on it. And So if you don't follow directions, it doesn't work. It should be working for you now. How many grips do you guys have? One or multiple? One. Okay, so there's a reason. I'm going to show you why that is. So if you go ahead and escape, right click. We're going to go to options. Or you can type in the word options. This dialog box should pop up for you. This is the options dialog box. Navigate to the selection tab. And under the selection tab, you have this area called grips. So it says show grips within blocks. Yours is unchecked probably. Okay. If you check it like mine is, now notice when I uncheck it, I get one grip. But if I check that box, I get multiple grips. So if you do that, you got more grip editing tools, but then sometimes it's a pain to have all of those things showing up. So if you want to limit those choices, you set it to don't show grips in your blocks. Okay? And if you want more choices, then you can toggle that on. Billy? Now right click. Okay, options bottom. Your object was selected, so it would allow you to get the option. Okay. All right, anybody else questions? Okay. So we're going to change the layer now. We're going to watch something kind of cool here. Kevin, is yours working right now? All right. Much better, isn't it?
Yeah.
Set layer 1 current. Okay, now I'm going to show you another insert tool. Just type in I and hit enter. And over on the side, this guy will pop out typically, and it'll show you in the current drawing. If you go to the current drawing tab, you'll notice, well, there's a block right there. So what you can do then, and notice down here, you can change these settings up. So if it says insertion point, I can just right click here and then say insert, and it'll allow me to pull this over and bring him over and insert him. And when you're done, you can dismiss that box. So insert can look differently depending on where you select it. Is that right? What do you notice about this block as opposed to the other block? The colors have changed. Now only one color has changed. Which one? The one that was created on the 0 layer. Okay. Here's why. I'll teach you in a second. Go to current drawing tab. Is that on the top? Yeah. Okay. Now right click on that. Yeah. Okay. Here's what's happening. This is unique to blocks. When you create an object on the 0 layer, and then you create a block out of it, it allows that to float up to whatever the current layer is when you insert it. Let me say that again. When you create an object on the 0 layer initially, and then you create a block out of that, anything that is on that 0 layer will float up to the current layer. So my current layer is layer 1, and so therefore you'll notice that that now is layer 1. Okay? So we're going to open up this box, set it to layer 2. We're going to go to insert again. Insert our block, and you'll notice this time, now that outside rectangle is yellow. Because again, that one's floated up. Do it for the other 2 layers. Layer 3. Insert it. Right click, let it float up. And we'll do it for the very last one. Layer 4, current, insert. And we got the very last guy that we're going to place. And I'm going to move that one. Okay, so I'm going to move that around. So just by virtue of the fact that we had a mix and match, layer 0, other colors mixed within it, within layers, these objects actually kind of exist on 2 layers simultaneously. The layer that they were inserted on and the layer that they were created on initially. It's the only way you can do this. Okay. Only way you can do this, and it's kind of cool and unique. So let's do something here, and we're going to kind of see how this works. I would like you to go out and freeze the zero layer. And what do you notice happens when we freeze the zero layer? The first block disappears, but none of the other block pieces disappear, do they? Right? Because none of those other pieces are on the zero layer, correct? All right, now watch what happens when we freeze layer 1. We should notice that we lose an entire block, but we're also losing pieces within the other blocks. Because remember, those objects exist on 2 layers simultaneously. You see that? So that's kind of a really cool principle about blocks. It's very unique. It's very different to anything else that you experience in AutoCAD. So if we go in and freeze layer 2, freeze layer 3, and ultimately, okay, you can kind of see how that works. So you can mix and match. If you freeze the insertion layer, the whole block disappears. If you freeze just pieces of those layers within it, just those pieces will disappear. So it's really a cool process. Okay, everybody get the idea? So again, we can go back and we'll thaw everything. Notice they come back. And this time I'm going to set the zero layer current. I'm just going to freeze layer 4 and notice my text is going in all of them. So it's really a neat process. Very neat. Okay. So that's unique. That's unique. So that's using the insert command. That's using the create command. So let's show you something else we can do with inserts. So we can change things up. Go ahead and follow everything if you will. We can change things up so that when we insert these guys that we can change like scale factors. So let's go back to this insert command right here. This is a nice one. Just hit that logo block. And notice at the bottom it's asking me scale. And then it says X, Y, and Z. Select X and enter NX as 2. And select Y and enter the Y as 0.5. Now notice what we've done to our block. We've squashed it in the Y direction and we've elongated it in the X direction. So we can scale them in X and Y equally, or Z, because you could have a 3-dimensional block, or we can scale it uniquely in one direction and not the other. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now, at one time in AutoCAD, because if you notice, that was a circle, right? What kind of object is that now? Is this a circle object? It's actually an ellipse. It's an ellipse now, right? At one time in AutoCAD, if you did a scale factor X and Y different, you could never explode that block. Okay, so that's not true any longer. So if the scale factors are not equal, you can still explode a block. But if you go back to release 12, that wouldn't work. Okay, there was no way to explode that block once you did that. Here's something really cool about scale factors. Let's say we want to mirror image this block. So instead of this going left to right, I want it to go right to left. You can enter negative scale factors. Watch this. Go into logo, go into the X scale, tell that -1 and hit enter. And notice now when you enter that block, it rotated it in the X direction about the Y axis. Notice it's mirrored. So I could mirror it in X, I could mirror it in Y. Why that's important is because, for instance, if you're drawing doors, some doors open left, some doors open right. You don't have to create 2 models. You can create 1 model and just mirror it to be whatever condition that you need. The other thing you can do with a block is you can rotate it. So if we insert again, notice there's a rotation angle. Select rotate. If I type in 30 degrees, notice my block is now rotated 30 degrees. So the conjunction of scale factor X, Y, and Z and rotations, you can do a whole lot with blocks. You can do a whole lot with them. You guys getting how this works? Pretty cool, right? So editing a block, scale factor, and rotation is very simple too. If you click on this block right here and right click, we can go to properties. Notice there's a scale factor X, scale factor Y, scale factor Z, and I can change those up in here. So if I want to bring that back to a one unit scale factor in the X and a 2 units in the Y, I can do that real easily. And when I get done with that, select that, hit that, there it is. So they're pretty easy to edit. They're really easy to edit, as a matter of fact. Okay? I see how that works? So here's another edit that I don't consider an edit, but you might consider it, some people might. I can basically kill a block by exploding it. So if we select that block right there, make sure you're on the one that's on layer 4, and we explode that, we can either come up to the modify explode, or you can just conveniently hit the X key and hit enter. Either way, go ahead and explode your block, and what do you notice happened to that block? Back into its original pieces. It's no longer a block. What do you notice about the exterior rectangle? It went back to what? The 0 layer, right? It went back to the 0. So once you exploded it, it dropped back. All the other objects stayed where they were, but that one got moved. Okay. So here's the ultimate editing tool in blocks. Besides what they call the block editor, because the block editor allows you to add things like parameter. I'll show you that here in a minute, but let me show you one really cool thing that you can do. Let's take that exploded block, and I'm just going to move it out of the way here. So I'm going to move that out of the way like that. Okay. And what we're going to do, we're going to change this block up. We're going to make some changes. So make sure this isn't a block. So click on it and make sure it's all individual objects. Okay, it's the one we exploded, because we're going to recreate this block. Okay, so I want you to do a couple things. We're going to edit the text. We're going to say EMET 110. I'm going to draw a couple of lines in here, and then we're going to change these things up. I'm going to draw a line from that corner to that corner. I'm going to do some trims out of here, so I'll get these guys set. I'm going to trim that up. So I'm going to, and just make any changes you want. What I'm doing is just a bunch of different changes. So I'm going to change this. I'm going to do my trims. I'm going to get rid of that line, that line, and that line, and that line. And then I'm going to do some more trims. So I'm going to get rid of that, and that, and that, and that. So just make some changes so you can see that you've really incorporated some new things into your logo. I'm going to create a new layer, call it layer 5, and I'm going to make layer 5 magenta. And then I'm going to move the objects that I just created to the magenta layer. Okay, so you can see I've drastically made some changes. Just make some changes that you can see, okay? They don't have to look like mine. Just make some changes. All right, so I added some objects, trimmed them. I put that on a new layer. I changed my text. So what I want to do now is I have this block inserted 1,000 times in my drawing. I don't want to go delete them and then replace them. I just want to replace them with this. So what we're going to do is redefine this block so that, or all of these, to look like this. Is everybody ready?
Sure.
Good? Okay, so we're going to go up and recreate this block. So here's the key when you do this. You go to the create command. You have to use the same name. If you don't use the same name, it's not going to make any change. Notice my thumbnail is still showing me the old block, right? Which is true. That's the block that's in there. Okay. Also, make sure you specify a new base point. Now, if you don't want this thing to move in the drawing, you have to use the same base point as the original one. I use the center. Okay, so I'm going to use the same center point. If I used a corner point this time, things are going to displace. All right, so you got to be careful with that. So we used the same name. We gave it the same base point. Now we got to select objects. I'm going to go out here and select those objects and then hit enter. Okay. Now then, we are going to go in and hit OK. Now we should be getting this message that that logo block already exists, and it's asking you what you want to do with it. If you say don't redefine it, then you're just canceling out. You're not doing anything. If you redefine it, though, which is what we want to do, it will update those blocks for you. So we're going to go ahead and redefine. And notice all my blocks down here now reference that new block. So you think about that. Just what I just did was edited 1,000 doors that quick. That quick. So, man, is this a time saver? It's a space saver. It's a time saver. And I can be really quick at it very effectively, very easily. All right. Did anybody's blocks move? Well, they probably moved. So why do you think they moved, Shelley? Because you didn't pick a new base point. So what happened was, or you did, if you did pick a new base point, it wasn't the original base point. Did you find your blocks? Type in Z, enter, E, enter. Yeah, okay. So you didn't type in any base point, so it used 0, 0. It displaced everything.
I clicked for a base point.
Well, maybe you didn't click on it. Okay. All right. So that's usually your common. So you can see that if you don't give it a proper base point, you'll redefine everything just perfectly, but it displaces it all over the place. That could be a problem too, a huge problem. Okay. So you have to be really careful with that. Okay. Yep. Hard to hear in the fan. Originally. So I originally used the center. So when I redefined it, I still want to use that center. The original block I used center, and I need to use the same center point for the redefined block. If I don't, they're not going to correlate. No, the center of the new one. Yeah, the center of the new one. You pick the center of the old one, that difference is the your X and Y displacement, so move by that amount. Okay. How do you fix it? Well, you can't fix it now. So you have to do an undo. You have to undo it and then redefine it. Because once you displace them, they're gone. Okay, they move. Okay. So the answer, this was a good question. This was a good question. If you did get your base point in the wrong spot, how do you fix it? I would immediately do an undo, move them back to where they were, and then redefine that block in the proper position. So you need to know where the original base point was. Okay?
Another question.
Yes?
So that block disappeared?
Because I had it to delete. I set it for delete. Okay? Yeah. Okay? Anybody else? Okay, so we looked at editing tools. You can use properties. Properties are cool. So remember, you can just click on your block. You can click on any block in your drawing, right-click it, go to properties. Notice there's position changes, scale factor changes, rotations. Okay, you can also change layers. If you really want to get into the editing tools, take your block and double-click it, and it'll open up this thing called the block editor. So once you click logo, hit OK. Now you're in what's called the block editor, and you can do all kinds of really cool things in here. We don't have time to mess with this, but it has those guys over there, this on this palette. These are ways that you can give it point locations. So you have two things on here. You have what's called a parameter and a constraint and actions, or three things. So these are pretty cool. We don't have a lot of time to mess with them, so we're not going to be able to. But if you double click a block, you're going to get into this editing tool, which gives you a lot of flexibility. And you can create what are called dynamic blocks then. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and we're just going to close that. Okay. All right, so here's a really cool tool. If you create blocks in your drawing, they're only in that drawing. So if I want to use those blocks in another drawing, I really have a couple of ways I could do it. I could save a prototype drawing that has the blocks in it as a prototype, then I can open up that drawing and use it, it'll be there. But if I want to export them out of this file, I have to get them out a different way. So the way to export anything out of this block, out of this drawing, that allows you then to bring it into another drawing, is to use a command called WBlock, which stands for write block. And interestingly, AutoCAD, I don't know why they don't use this tool in much. They don't have that up there in the block section. So in the block panel here, you won't find it. This is kind of a hard one to know unless you just like know it. I know it because I teach it, and I've been using it for a long time. So we're just going to type in WBlock, hit enter, and you get this write block dialog box. So write block is kind of the reverse of insert. Insert's bringing blocks into your drawing. WBlock is going to export blocks out of your drawing. Okay. So this is really cool. Watch, you've got three choices. For the source, you can export a block. Okay. Any block in your drawing that shows up in this list, you can export. The downside with this is you can only do it at one at a time. So if you have 200 blocks in your drawing, you're going to have to do this 200 times. The other thing you can do is export the entire drawing. So if I hit export entire drawing, I'm going to take this drawing and basically write it out to file. Well, that's like something else that we do called save as. That's exactly like a save as, except it's not. The difference is when you do entire drawing WBlock, it goes in and purges all the junk out of that drawing that's not being used. So if you have all these layers, let's say you have 500 layers in that drawing and you're only using 5 of them, okay? When you WBlock that drawing out, it's going to lose 495 of those layers because they're not being used. So any unused line type, any unused layer, any unused text style, any unused whatever, it purges it out. It cleans up your dirty laundry, okay? So if you do a save as, it just saves everything. When I do a WBlock entire drawing, it cleans up all my junk, cleans up all my clutter. This is a really cool tool. When I get drawings from people in industry, oh man, you should see the garbage that you get. They got all this junk in there they don't use, they don't need. First thing I'll do is I'll open their drawing and then I'll purge it out by going through this. I'll just do you can do a save as export. Okay. So the third option, and this is also really cool, if you go to objects, it allows you to select objects on screen that you want to write out. So here's a good example of that. Imagine the drawing CAD file for this building right here. It's got to be huge. You know, you got all these floors and you got all these, you know, rooms in each floor, right? If David, I'm giving you a drawing and you just need to work in this room, I don't need to give you everything necessarily, right? So what I can do is basically just clip out what I don't want. I could open up this room. I could do a window around the objects that I want to give you. Just export those out, leave everything else behind, and you have this file that's, you know, a cookie cutter as opposed to the whole world, okay? Plus, I don't necessarily want to give somebody all of my stuff, especially if I'm an architect or an engineer. I don't want to give them everything. So these are all really cool options. So we're going to go back to block as our source, and we're going to just click this guy, logo, So when you do that, it knows where the base point is. It knows where the objects you're talking about, so those gray out. And then it just wants to know, what do you want to call this and where do you want to place it? So if you go over to this 3-button thing here, this ellipsis, click on that. It'll give you those options. So let's take this to the desktop. And let's call this, if you want to, let's call this logo X. Because we already have a block that's called logo. So we're going to call this logo X. Save it, and then hit OK. And when you do that, you might have noticed when you hit OK, there was a real quick blip on the top screen. What that was showing you was a thumbnail of what it did, essentially. If you minimize this screen right here, you'll notice sitting out on the desktop, there should be a file there called logo X. That's the file we just exported. There's my logo X drawing. And notice, it's not a block. It's a DWG file, okay? It's a DWG. So let's go back in and open up that DWG file, logo X. And you may have to do a zoom extents to see it, because you notice where 0, 0 is, it's sitting right on top of where your base point was. In my case, it's right where my base point is. So let me ask you, is this a block? Or is this a logo? Or is this a block or is it a drawing? It's a drawing. Okay, it's a drawing. So you can make changes in here. Okay, you can do some things. In fact, here's what I want to do. I want to make a few changes. I want you to go into this drawing and make some color changes. Now notice we still have layer 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so what we're going to do is I want to make layer 1 yellow. I want to make layer 2, we will make that magenta. We will make layer 3 blue. And we will make layer 4 gray. Okay. And we're going to save that. So just hit the save. All right, so. What we can do now, you have a DWG file, you can bring another DWG file into a DWG file. So that's what insert will allow you to do. Besides inserting blocks, you can also insert DWG files into DWG files. Now, here's the thing to understand. When you bring a DWG file externally into a DWG file that exists, it takes all the stuff in the external drawing and it incorporates it into the other file. So if you have layer XYZ in the external file and 1, 2, 3 in the internal file, when you bring it in, you're going to have 1, 2, 3 and XYZ. Okay, so it incorporates them, right? But here's the thing: the layer names in this file are exactly the same thing as the layer names in the other file that we're going to insert it in. You agree? But what's different about them? Colors are going to be different, okay? So look at my colors. Look at my colors that I just switched here. I got 0, I got 1 is yellow, 2 is magenta, 3 is blue, 4 is gray, and 5 is magenta. If I go back to that drawing here, notice same names, but they're what? Red, yellow, green, blue, or cyan, and magenta. So when I incorporate these two drawings, what's going to happen, I'm going to have layers that have the same name, but they have different settings on them. So we're going to see something that's going to happen here. Okay, let's see, let's watch what happens. So I want you to, you can go ahead and close your logo X drawing if you want. We are now going to insert. We're going to go to the insert command. I'm just going to type in I and hit insert. This box pops up. We're going to go to this little ellipsis here, which is a browse button. Browse to the desktop. Find logo X. Notice logo X, it finds it. Look at the color scheme on that. I want you to pay attention to that, right? There's logo X. Go ahead and open it. It shows up in your drawing. Right click on it and insert it. What happened? It lost the colors that it had and it gained the colors what? That were already in there. And the reason is because you have two layers that have the same name, but they have different settings. Well, you can't have two layers with different, you can't have one layer, layer one that's red and one layer, layer one that's green. So you can't have that simultaneously. So what happens is the base layer wins and the inserted layer drawing loses. Okay, so that's the problem. But now how many blocks do we have in our drawing? Well, let's see. Open up this command, drop that down, and you should have a logo drawing and a logo X drawing now, or a logo X block. For all intent and purpose, they're the same block. Okay. So insert's cool because you can insert blocks internally, or you can insert DWGs externally. Okay. W block is the reverse. W block allows you to export blocks, export objects, or export and the whole file. Okay, pretty neat. All right, MInsert. MInsert stands for multiple insert. So this is like an array, and it is kind of a limited array. I'm going to come over here on the side here, and I'm going to insert with a MInsert, multiple insert. You have to type this in. This is also one of those old commands, multiple insert, or what I call MInsert. Okay? And it'll ask you to choose the block. So I'm going to choose a block name. And let's see, I'm going to choose logo. Oops. Do that again. Logo. All right, so once you get logo to show up, just click it anywhere. And then it wants to know scale factors. So I'm not going to change the scale factor, so I'm going to hit 1 for the X and 1 for the Y. Then it wants to know a rotation. I'm just going to tell it 0 for the rotation. So now it wants to know numbers of rows and numbers of columns. So what this is going to do is generate a rectangular array for you. Okay. So remember, rows are going to go in this direction. Columns are going to go across. Okay. So let's type in, let's say 5 rows and 10 columns. Unit cell between each. So if my square was 2 inches, I want it to be at minimum of 2. So I'm going to make it 2.25 and also 2.25. Geez, I keep hitting 22. And there is my MInserted block. Okay, that's one object. One object. Now, this is like that array we talked about, right? The rectangular array. You count my objects? I should have 5 this way and 10 that way. If I did right. This block can't be exploded. This block can't be edited. Okay, so this really, it's a real file-saving device, but you really can't do much with it. So if you're okay with that, and insert it. If you're not, what I would do is insert a block and then array it. You have more flexibility. If you insert a block and array it, you have more flexibility. More objects, but not much flexibility. If I try to explode this, click on this guy, you'll notice it's all one object. And if I try to explode it, it says, one was minserted. So you can't explode this. So you can't explode it, you can't edit it. You could redefine that block, but that's be about it. Okay. Any questions on that? Base allows you to set the base point up so that when you insert a block from another drawing, it's using that as a handle. Otherwise, it uses whatever your current base is, which is usually 0, 0, 0. Okay. Usually 0, 0. Okay. Any questions? We are going to be doing an 8th assignment dealing with blocks. We're going to create little electronic components, resistors, capacitors, those kind of things in a wiring diagram. Each one of those little guys is going to be a block symbol. We're just going to insert them. Now, it's going to be pretty simple. I got to go run some copies yet, but we're going to be doing that. We'd normally be putting attributes on there, but we just don't have time. Okay? We don't have time. Does anybody have any questions on this then? None that you can think of right now? Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. I got to get a couple of handouts to you guys. I'll get this guy posted later today. And then